Hello, everyone. You are about to hear a brief summary of the film Let's Go to Prison. Enjoy watching. John Leshchitsky has just been released from prison after serving his third sentence. Since childhood, he has been drawn to the dark side. 8 years ago, John stole a van containing a huge lottery-winning check. He was unable to cash it. Guilty, said the judge. Society must be protected from worthless scum like you. The verdict? 7 years in a juvenile detention center. That's how the system turned John into a desperate criminal. At 18, he tried to rob mail carriers but discharged his gun when he only wanted to scare them. Sentence: 4 years. If stupidity were a crime, you would have gotten life. 6 months after serving his sentence, the same judge sent John back to prison for car theft. Once free, the young man decided he had to take revenge on the judge, but the old man had died 3 days earlier. In a fit of rage, John shot up a phone booth. In a bar, he came across an article about the judge's son, Nelson Biederman, opening a memorial. It seemed John had found someone to take it out on. While Nelson was giving his speech, the criminal got into his car. There, he stole some change, emptied his inhaler, and even spat into his coffee, twice. Nelson turned out to be quite the jerk. He squandered money and yelled at his father's foundation chairman. John was driving nearby and keeping an eye on his target. The asthmatic man frantically tried to use the empty inhaler. In a panic, he rushed into a pharmacy and knocked over the shelves. "Another junkie!" shouted the owner. His wife was distraught. They decided that the madman was threatening them with a gun. John added fuel to the fire and fired a shot. In response, the woman fired her gun directly at Nelson. The whole chaos was captured on camera. The board of directors refused to help Nelson, and lawyers advised him to take the blame. The time for the trial came. John was also in the courtroom. Nelson hoped that his father's name would help, but the female judge hated people like him. His fate was left to the jury, whom Nelson called idiots. And he was not mistaken. Biederman was defended by his deputy, Dwayne, who talked complete nonsense and even mentioned Jurassic Park. The jury found Nelson guilty of attempted robbery and sentenced him to 3 to 5 years in Rosmar prison. John imagined how they would beat and rape him, but he felt no joy. He wanted to hurt the rich man himself. When 2 undercover cops came looking for weed, John pretended not to understand and voluntarily went back to prison just to get back at Biederman. He agreed to the same sentence in the same prison. On the bus, he sat next to Nelson. John suggested they ask to be put in the same cell. Nelson was grateful the others had given him a cold reception. Prison warden welcomed the newcomers and joked that the innocent could raise their hands and leave. One raised his hand and got a rifle butt in the stomach. "Write your complaints on paper, roll them into a tube, and shove them up your ass," Warden advised. John bribed the guard and ended up in the same cell as Biederman. When Biederman saw the tiny room, he immediately started crying. John told him to stop whining, or he wouldn't last a week. At lunch, Nelson forgot to stand up and saw Leonard stab an inmate right in front of him. The guard asked who did it. John told him, and Nelson turned Leonard in. In the cell, Leonard immediately warned him, "Don't snitch in prison." In the shower, the huge Barry showed interest in Nelson. John told everyone that he was his rooster and forbade anyone to touch him. Barry harbored resentment. Later, Nelson was kidnapped and taken to a cell with garlands and wine from the toilet. Barry put a knife to his throat and declared him his property, but he said, "Don't rush. First, court." At the same time, John was persuading the inmates to beat Nelson and pour nasty stuff into his food. But fate played out differently. Leonard came out of solitary confinement and tried to kill Nelson. Nelson fought back and accidentally injected him with a lethal syringe. Leonard died. Now Nelson became the boss of the White Brotherhood. He had power. Barry fell sincerely in love with him. John was furious. His plan for revenge was falling apart. In prison, Nelson was already putting on musicals. People thanked him, but he felt he owed it to John. A hearing for early release was coming up. John mixed poison into a soda and gave him a farewell gift. Nelson was wary, but drank it all and collapsed. The words "white power" were written on his forehead. His release was denied. Then they arranged a fight to the death between John and Nelson. The inmates placed bets. They fought with screwdrivers and syringes filled with chemicals. Both received fatal blows. "It's a draw," Shanahan announced. Nelson was buried. His inheritance, $8 million, went to his adopted son. But that night, Barry dug him up. Nelson had arranged in advance with a chemist for a mixture that would put him into a coma. A year passed. Barry and Nelson opened the Duckling Winery. John and a couple of ex-cons also worked there. The wine turned out to be rotten, with a taste of ammonia, but critics were forced to give it high ratings.